Hey guys, if you're interested in checking out a video version of the show, please visit the LowKey Geek channel on YouTube. There you can not only catch the video version of the podcast, but you can also check out my other projects and short form video that I produce. You can find a link in the description. Otherwise, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Movie Time.
Movie time?
You got myself, Rene, LOWKEY GEEK here, and Blake the Wolf. What's going on, dude?
Rene, what is up, my dude? I am feeling rather strange after that movie, and I'm not sure what to think or how to feel, and I'm glad you're here to guide me.
Anything I can do to help, because I too am going through a multitude or multiverse of emotions after seeing this movie. And sometimes it's driving me a little mad. I don't know. But I think this is a good forum for us to talk about it. If you're coming from our non-spoiler review, welcome back. We are excited to talk more about Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. If you're new to the channel, Movie Time is a weekly podcast where two buds talk about movies and bullshit about other things. Sometimes, depends. But we do this on a weekly basis on the YouTube channel. And if you like what you see, hit that like, subscribe, share it with your friends, talk about it. Talk about it in the comments. Give us some feedback. Talk about the topics we're talking about. Let's have a discussion about it. And if you are looking for an audio version of this, you could find it on your audio podcast platform of choice. Just look for the LOWKEY GEEK channel there, where you could download this and many other episodes as well. So without further ado, we're not going to go into our usual, let's think, what do we think about this movie? Let's just dive into this, because we already did that. And if you want to see that, you could easily find the video. I'll provide a link in the description for you to go backwards. And again, this is spoiler territory. So if you have not watched the movie yet and you don't want anything ruined for you, what are you doing here? Stop watching, pause, bookmark it, save it for later. Come back tonight, depending on, or later this morning, wherever you are, whenever you decide to watch it. Or if you just don't give a shit and you just want to hear us talk about the movie in general, then stick around. Listen to what we have to say. But spoiler alert is on the screen right now, so we are going to dive into spoiler territory. So I think one of the things that I mentioned in our non-spoiler review about this is the treatment of Doctor Strange's character, right? Because when we were first introduced to him, obviously, yes, he is the arrogant surgeon. He thinks he's above it all and all that stuff like that. And that carried with him for a while, because he was the sorcerer supreme. He was the protector of the realm, or what have you, and all that stuff like that. And during the events of Endgame, he was also seen as kind of like the square dude who's just like, well, you can't do this, we shouldn't do that, you be careful what you do here, all that kind of stuff like that. And we still saw a good amount of that in No Way Home. Here, I feel like they really tried to push him to be your typical comic book superhero, where he was a little bit more, not happy-go-lucky, but gotta save the day, gotta do this. And nothing screamed that more so than when he was at Christine's wedding and he hears something happening outside. And you see this, people running in the streets of New York and all that. And what does he do? He does a Spider-Man/Superman thing of just like doing one of these things, flying off the balcony. And then all of a sudden he's Doctor Strange mode like that. And that was just like, Sam Raimi, you bastard, you did that on purpose, right? What were your thoughts on how they handled Strange's character in this movie?
Great goatee work, more than anything else. Just off the bat, any huge comic book fans or fans of this movie, go ahead and just start writing your comments right now below about how much you hate my opinions. I'm giving this movie 7 pizza balls out of a dozen pizza balls. And my main takeaway from the movie is that I really want to eat pizza balls immediately, and that I want to be a Sam Raimi fan. I am not a Sam Raimi fan. I loved the first Doctor Strange movie. It was, at the time, like my favorite or a top 3 Marvel movie at that time, and then now we're in a whole new part of the MC multiverse. I did not love this movie. There was a lot of things about it that I did not like. We're going to talk through it, and one of my favorite things about having these convos with you is I
Mhm.
have questions because I'm
Sure.
not as much of a comic book person. I'm not as steeped in the lore as you are, and so if anyone's a casual fan and has some like just basic questions, stick around because I'm gonna grill you, Rene, on a few like who the
Yeah.
hell was that? What is happening here?
Hmm.
Stuff. But I've seen every MCU movie to date and loved a lot of them. There have been a few flops here and there, and I'm a little bummed at this movie and I'm gonna put it more in the flop category.
Hmm.
Um, was among my least favorite. How they handled Doctor Strange, I think my question overall is like how Sam Raimi handled this movie.
Yeah.
I think it was a lost opportunity for the MCU to regain some footing after a huge box office with Spider-Man and to pave the way home or forward to a more successful MCU post COVID. The theater box office has not been reliable, and then they have a Spider-Man moment, and there's a minute where I was afraid, like superheroes movies, this might be a beginning of an end situation. If people
Hmm.
are not feeling the need to go to the theaters to see what the next new big movie is, which the MCU has been doing so consistently for so long and set so many box office records for so many years,
Yeah.
this feels like after Eternals, after Black Widow, and this one, maybe Spider-Man is the fluke. I'm not sure. I did not want to feel that way. I went into this. I loved the first Doctor Strange movie. I like that character a lot. You're right about something though with how they handled him. He's been more cynical in the past
Hmm.
and the most reserved one. And unfortunately, to borrow a quote from Endgame, I looked forward in time. I saw 14,605 futures, and in this one, this movie sucked. That's
Oh,
sadly the universe that we live
burn, burn, sick burn.
in. Yeah, that's I don't have I have more questions than anything,
Sure.
and I actually do want to appreciate this movie more. I know that with like I've said it in our other video, the America Chavez character did not love their acting at all.
Hmm.
Cumberbatch, known quantity, he enjoys putting on the goatee and the cape. I think he's kind of in his element out there for sure. Rachel McAdams, if you're a bird, I'm a bird, and I've loved Rachel McAdams since The Notebook. Benedict Wong, I want him to have his own franchise or TV show, or just like give that man as much time on screen as
Yeah.
possible.
Hmm.
Fully underrated in the Hollywood world and in the MCU also. That they had an opportunity to bring in someone who's either a known quantity or they're going to be the next superstar of the MCU. After this one, I don't know that I'm interested in seeing a spinoff.
Hmm.
What I don't know is that the actress's Xochitl Gomez playing America Chavez, is that her fault, or because there was like I'm going to call it like the Disney like actor style kind of thing where
Yeah.
it wasn't high quality acting. Or if it was the Sam Raimi doing his campy thing with the movie and the camera, this felt like a one thing I liked about Doctor Strange before is it was better dialogue. This one had a couple jokes where I laughed, and otherwise a lot of
Mm.
it was more gung ho. It's exactly what you're saying. It was a more happy go lucky, like I don't have a choice. I can't overthink things. I just got to keep saving the day, and if that means
Yeah.
I'm breaking my own rules and I become a flying ball of paint, and so be it. We got to take those risks. Whereas before he was much more calculated. And I like that Doctor Strange. I I almost feel like Sam Raimi said, "Okay, you want me to make one of these movies? I'm going to need to have final cut on something, the script, the movie. I don't know how much, but I just think they gave him too much freedom in that regard, enough
Hmm.
to where they could have had a spinoff for that America Chavez character if they played that right. And I don't know that that movie gets made. I'm curious how the box office does and how people react to it in general.
Yeah. No, I think like what I mentioned in our other video, this is definitely one of those introductions to someone we're definitely going to see more of later on down the line with America Chavez. And they're definitely going young. They're definitely going the younger route here. I said I kind of compared it to the Hawkeye series, where we're introduced to Haley Steinfeld character, who's a younger, quote unquote, hero. We have now America Chavez. We have the new Miss Marvel show coming out on Disney Plus, who's going to be a younger, again, version of a Captain Marvel-like character. So they really are going more young, and I think in the longevity of the MCU makes sense, because we get to grow up with these characters, and unlike your Downey Juniors, your Evans, or what have you, they're getting older, right? So we don't want to. No one wants to see superheroes age older, like past our ages, right? Like we want to see them mature and grow up. We don't want to see them get old and gray and all that stuff like that. Now, unless you're talking about a storyline like Logan or something like that, where someone's like really in the last years of his life, totally different scenario, like intriguing stories and all that stuff like that. But you don't really feel like you're going to get a lot of that in the MCU as a whole, right? So definitely gearing towards the younger crowd. And for me, like, her acting, I think it is a little bit mixture of Sam Raimi plus the Disneyfication of it all too. And again, I'm curious to see how Miss Marvel is going to turn out on Disney Plus, and how that's going to, is that going to be like more CW territory or what have you? We don't know, right? So it's definitely interesting there. And as far as acting, the one person I didn't hear you mention is Elizabeth Olsen. Because I find Elizabeth Olsen to be a really phenomenal actress. Like, she does a lot of great stuff. And if you've watched WandaVision, the more and more you fell in love with her and the character of Wanda. Now, my fear while I was watching this movie, now don't get me wrong, Elizabeth Olsen was still fantastic in this movie. However, my fear, and this was more of the things I don't like about Sam Raimi, is I thought she was getting very, very close to that line of the mustache twirling villain, kind of just like, oh, I got to do this. Oh, you're going to take me to that place and we're going to figure it out. And, it's like, you got to give it to me now. And, it was very, very on that borderline.
It was not nuanced. And she is good at nuanced acting and conveying 2 or 3 emotions at the same time, where she's having to fight someone and be excited and cry over Paul Bettany.
Right.
Martha Marcy May Marlene was the first time I saw her, and that movie is incredible. She can do proper great acting. You're right.
Oh, yeah.
I left her off. WandaVision was a good vehicle for her. I'm a little sad that they may have capped off WandaVision with this movie. I don't know how many times you can send a character to her brink and have her absolutely like lose herself and her footing and her ground and like what she believes in. That was happening in the movies, in WandaVision, and now. And at some point, you don't really come back. Like, Hawkeye's kind of hit his limit a couple times. We've seen her characters hit their limit a couple times. There's other characters who've just like been good or consistent, or like Spider-Man, kind of always on the come up, it seems. Yeah. This character is just always on the down. So I love Elizabeth Olsen. She did as good as anybody could with this script and this movie. I would hate it if her character was a casualty of this movie. If so, then like that's a big loss. And if you replace that with the actress playing America Chavez, then I think that's a big whiff, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, I know, like, at the end of this movie, and we'll talk about like proper, like the ending and what does it all mean and all that stuff like that. But, in this movie, it appears that WandaVision takes herself out because she's trying to completely close the door in the whole dark magic scenario, right? So it looks like she may be gone, but I don't think she's completely gone, because she's one of the strongest MCU characters out there. So to kind of ask her out like that in such an easy way, well, again, under her own doing, I think that's a wasted opportunity, especially to such a beloved character as Wanda / Scarlet Witch, right? But the one thing that they didn't fool around with is that immediately in the movie, they let you know right away that she's the bad guy. right? It's like, they had the meeting, and you've seen this in the trailer where Strange and her meet in the fields, and she's dealing with apple trees or whatever the case is, what have you. She's still pining over her children that she created, that she, kind of wants back and all that. And she plays along as if like she's like the victim, like, I'm so sorry about what happened in Westview, like I totally changed. And then she slips up, right? And she's like, well, why don't you bring Chavez to me? And then she kind of does one of those like stops, and she's like, wait a minute. You never told me her name, did you? And he's like, no. And then it was also, I was like, ha ha, da 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 da, I tricked you, and this is my realm now, and I'm the Scarlet Witch. And I was just like, oh no. I'm like, what are they doing? So I think for a lot of people who really loved WandaVision, a lot of people who maybe were questioning the dark turn of her, that we saw a little bit of in WandaVision, I think a lot of those people are going to be really thrown off in this movie. And this happens really early on in the movie too. And I think watching the journey of Wanda throughout, there were a lot of great moments, and there were a lot of like fantastic moments where the Sam Raimi style of like editing and movie making really fits well. And that's a lot of like the more horror stylings of it all, like when she confronts Strange and all of a sudden she finds herself in this weird dimension. The way they handled like the reflections and her usage of like trying to figure things out and get herself back into the reality world and all that, those were some of like the best like effects and moments of the movie where I was just like, holy shit, this is freaky. This is really scary. And, even like Strange and Wong, and they're like, what the hell's happening? She's breaking through, cover the reflections. And they're like trying to cover puddles and this and that.
Yeah.
And that was like the one true sequence where we saw a lot of Raimi's editing style, like the quick cuts, like door, sound, this and all that kind of stuff like that. And then, every time you see anything that's like undead like in the movements of undead, like we see things that he's used in Evil Dead and all that stuff like that, that's just his way. But I think it worked in this movie. My only fear was just, again, with Wanda, like how villainy are they going to make her? How like shticky are they going to make her? And they got very close a lot. They really did. But I think at the end of the day, and I credit Olsen's acting to this, is that she found a way to reel it back in towards the end, especially when they kind of, did the big reveal, not the reveal, but they allowed her to see the reality or the multiverse reality of her children alive, and seeing how they were acting towards her. They're like, our mom wouldn't freaking try to kill us or like hurt anybody, right? And, they have that touching moment between her and the alternate reality of Wanda. Wanda touches her face and just keep in mind that I'm going to keep them safe and they're going to be cool with me. And I thought, again, because of her acting, I think that really worked. It worked out really well, and it kind of saved the character for me in the movie. Now, what happens to her moving forward, I don't know, but it was just one of those things that I thought was very necessary to talk about.
Yeah, the looking at this as a horror movie actually also helps. Looking at it as a campy movie helped me kind of reframe it as why wasn't this high quality as other MCU movies. Looking at it as a horror movie, because MCU hasn't done a horror movie. They've done so many other genres, like the buddy comedy and the heist movie, and so many different takes on. This one was the most horror movie for sure. There's a few moments. There's like her fingers are black and she's doing the magic, and she looks and she's like, there's the zombie Doctor Strange of it all. There's a moment where right before Charles Xavier, spoiler, Charles Xavier's fucking dead. Where he's like, as the red smoke floating towards him and his look, and his neck snaps. That was intense. There's a few moments that actually worked. There was another one that did not work at all. We're in the like watery, sewery area, and there's a door behind them that won't open, and she's on the other side of the door, and then everything slows down, and they're
That
scared. They go,
was,
"Where is she?"
yeah.
The water is slowing down, and their heart rates, and you can see, and they go, "Where is she? She just appeared." That was really bad. Like, if this is his strong suit, he was trying to do a bad jump scare. It was really weak, in my opinion, because like a good jump scare would have worked in that moment. I wouldn't even be shocked if he made a good jump scare and MCU said, "Whoa, that's too much horror. We can't really freak. We got 8-year-olds we're trying to win over with our casting choices, and you can't do that." I don't know, but that was a flop of a moment in a movie, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I think I was the only one laughing during that moment because it's like it was such intensity. They're running away from. So basically, what happens is that they do this thing called dream walk, right? Where part of the Darkhold magic is that you can possess another person's being and basically use them as an avatar, right? And she's running through this alternate reality, chasing down Chavez, Strange, and Wong. Oh no, not Wong. Sorry, Christine. Right? Yeah, I think it was Christine Palmer that was with them. And you're right. They're in the sewer thing, and then they're closing doors behind them. Right? Closing doors, and she keeps busting through them. Why this one door she didn't decide to bust through didn't make any sense, because she has the power to do it. But then why stop running? Why were they just staring at the door waiting for her to bust through? Right? And then everything slows down. Even the droplets of water start slowing down, and he has such intensity and all that. And then almost as if there was like a side door that they didn't see, and she's like, "Surprise, suckers, I'm here." It's like, what? It was just like one of those weird things. It felt like something you would have seen out of the movie *Malignant*. And I don't know if you've seen that movie, but oh my God, it was just, it was probably one of the more cringy moments in this movie that it just didn't work. You're right. It didn't work. And I'm glad you brought that up, because that was really, really out of nowhere and quite unfortunate. But looking for the latest Doctor Strange collectibles and action figures? How about this exclusive Scarlet Witch Funko Pop? You can get this and so much more only at Entertainment Earth. For 26 years, Entertainment Earth has been the premier online destination for the latest and greatest toys, the most exciting action figures, and the coolest gifts and collectibles pop culture has to offer. Visit the link in the description and use code SPRINGFREE22 to get yourself free shipping on all orders over $39. This offer is only valid in the US, but fear not, they still ship overseas. Go and visit entertainmentearth.com and get yourself something awesome. Entertainment Earth, so many toys, so much fun. Before we talk about, the big I guess middle scene where you alluded to Professor X and all that stuff like that. Before we talk about that, I want to talk about some of the other storylines that they kind of glossed over, really. And I think one of the major ones, which it kind of leads to this. So, they're jumping through dimensions, and they finally end up in this one dimension, right? And it looks like an alternate future of New York City. Red means go, green means stop, all that stuff like that. Very interesting moment between. So it is a Sam Raimi movie, so of course there's going to be a cameo by Bruce Campbell, who plays this pizza ball vendor. And I'm telling you, if Avengers Campus in Disney does not start selling pizza balls, like starting this weekend, missed opportunity, because that is going to be a hot ticket. I want some. We were talking before this, and like we would die to have some just right here on our plate as we're talking about this stuff right now, because those look pretty good. But nice little funny moment between them and Bruce Campbell there, and he does the whole army of Evil Dead thing where he starts punching himself and all that kind of stuff like that. But they run into Baron Mordo, right? We haven't seen Baron Mordo since the end of the first Doctor Strange movie. Now, when we saw the ending of the first Doctor Strange movie, there is a post-credit scene where Mordo is apparently going around and he is jealous of all these people who have, kind of like sorcery-like powers, right? So he's sucking them back in for himself. So they were really building him up to be like this big rival of Strange. Fast forward, what now? 6 years later, apparently that was a thing, but we never saw it. We never seen anything happen. But how do we know? Because we get a little narrative from Doctor Strange saying, "Uh-oh, here's Mordo." Where in my reality, he kind of is jealous of me. He kind of doesn't like me, and all this kind of stuff like that. What? Where did all that happen? And it kind of tried to build that tension. It's like, well, how is this version gonna react? And it looks like they're buddies and all that kind of stuff. At least at that moment. But it was so weird that they kind of brushed over the whole storyline that they were building towards, and then they were just like, you know what, we'll just do a quick mention to catch everyone up to speed on it. And I'm like, wow, I've never seen a Marvel film do that, because Marvel films have always been very specific and very at least almost as good, almost perfect when it comes to tying up storylines. And that's one storyline they never tied up at all. And I think it provided a huge plot hole. Now, I don't know how much you remember from the original Strange movie, but when you saw Mordo show up, like, were you like, oh, I remember that guy. What happened to that dude?
Only because it's Chiwetel Ejiofor, and he's a great actor, and I remember him very clearly. But I don't know that plot. I don't know. I actually thought for a second that he was in a post-credit scene for something, and then no, I'm trying to check. I can't find anything where he's been in MCU since first Doctor Strange, right? The I love that actor, so I did recall him being there. There was a couple things. The other interesting thing, on the other hand, while they did exposition for like, oh, I remember you, old friend, and they mentioned it a couple times because it was so crucial. Like, oh, did you know that in our other world we were enemies? After he'd already explained that to the audience,
Right.
What I think is interesting, unless I missed it, they did not do any great exposition on WandaVision. They did essentially as if WandaVision, as if all you had to know was that the blip happened and she loses vision. And then something happened in the meantime where she did something regrettable, and Doctor Strange is, going to be mad at her for it. He did not do. I guess he mentions that if she could control the whole town, then what if she did that to Kamar-Taj or something like that? But there wasn't much of that. There was more exposition on Chiwetel Ejiofor's character than on the TV show WandaVision. I think the bet might be that so many people saw WandaVision, and that it's not fully necessary to understand this movie. But that's a huge, to see her character go from how she ends in MCU, where she's a sweetheart, essentially. She'd softened for love. And then going into this one where she's just like, I'm pure evil. That's a flip switching that is hard to sell for anybody. And it feels kind of like shortchanging an actress of not watching them evolve into madness, or even explaining that very well. Of like, oh, the man you love died, and now you're just making absolutely bonkers decisions. Right. Speaking of which, like, the fact that Doctor Strange, who used to be cynical and scientifically calculated, trusted her after knowing the wild shit she had just done in WandaVision, doesn't make sense. That's when you're talking about earlier how the Doctor Strange character had changed. That's to me one of the biggest things, where he's just going for it, and somebody goes, it's America Chavez, and someone goes, okay, so just to be clear, you found the woman who has been trying to kill me, and you told her exactly where I am, the person you said she's our only hope. Wasn't that the only hope, or did you just fuck us? Because Doctor Strange used to be the one kind of unfucking things, or trying to make sure. Now he's just fucking up. And at some point you're like, well, how many multiverse universes are you going to have to go through before you slow down for one damn second and maybe try to recalculate the odds? The idea that, like, oh, I have to suck out her powers is how the movie starts, and that's his nightmare. He did not learn from, eventually by the end of the movie, he learns from the nightmare and says, oh, maybe there's a way that doesn't result in me getting more power. If they had explained this movie by saying Doctor Strange had started doing a lot of cocaine and was just like off the wall and just making some poor life decisions, not thinking things through, just like, woo, let's keep going. Yeah, another multiverse, sign me up, baby. The person who just destroyed and brainwashed an entire town and tried to do a lot of murder, yeah, I'll trust her with the most secret information that will protect the multiverse. Get out of here. And then the other one that to me is a hard sell is Wanda thinking that I need to go find a universe where my boys exist. And then I'm gonna just do an Indiana Jones switcheroo in that peaceful and lovely home and just do you know what their names are? Like, how are you pulling this off? You need to have a little bit more planning. And instead, she does the fucking opposite and just immediately attacks the mom. Not a smart move if you want to
Right.
transition these boys into their new home. I'm not an adoption expert, but I'm guessing the advice to have a good relationship with your children is not to attack their mom in front of them. That might just mess them up a little bit. Maybe your like idyllic 1950s Leave It to Beaver WandaVision vision isn't going to come true anymore.
Right.
There's a couple things there where this movie sold those concepts short, didn't explain them or work them through with the script. I understand you're not going to be able to answer every single question. You'd have to basically say Wanda went completely bonkers.
Yeah.
Isn't even able to do a lie for more than 8 seconds when we first see her. And is so off the rails that she can't even think one strategy step of, oh, here's my ultimate goal. What happens then? No idea. We'll wing it and then fuck that up so badly that she did, because then she gets to come back to Earth again. But she definitely didn't learn her lesson from WandaVision. And then Doctor Strange, him making such just all-out choices, going for it. It's Cancun, baby. Let's get fucked up and just run through the multiverse.
Yeah.
I didn't like that. I'm not trying to nitpick. I think those help genuinely contribute to why this movie is not very compelling. It doesn't do nuance at all.
Right. Yeah, and it's the nitpicking is what the fans are going to do, because like I said, MCU and Marvel, they've always done a really good job at being very buttoned up with a lot of things, right? And I felt like this is one of those few movies, if there were any other movie like this, where they really didn't like include a lot of things, or they were very half-assing story bits just to progress forward, right? Now, yeah, granted, the whole WandaVision switch from the last time we saw her on the big screen to seeing her on the big screen now, if you didn't watch WandaVision, obviously you're going to be completely lost, right? So I think it's more of them entrusting that their audience has been following the journey of everybody this whole time, right? So being able to pick it up, and it kind of in a way is forcing the audience to, well, if you didn't watch WandaVision, you better watch this first, then watch the movie. Or if you watch the movie, go back and watch WandaVision to understand where she's coming from and all this stuff like that. Because everyone will be like, well, who the fuck are these two kids? Right? And then also, one could also say, you're telling me that in all the alternate realities of Wanda and her kids, that Vision is dead in all of them? Because we never saw Vision in any of them. You know, it's just like, so are you saying the one constant that happens in all the multiverses is that Vision has to die? Because where is he?
Yeah. Or who's the dad? Or like virgin birth situation, like what's happening here?
Right.
That's a good point. That's tragic.
Yeah. It's like that's, and if they focused in on that, right, that's a sad story. That adds more of that emotion that we saw in WandaVision, right? Where it's just like the one constant in the world is that Vision has to be dead no matter what. You know, that's unfortunate. And I think that was even one of the storyline. I think that was one of the overall things that happened in WandaVision, where it's like, no matter what, we can't save Vision. Vision has to be dead, right? Because that's what she tries to do on the show. And she created this life and this family and all that stuff like that. But yet, if there are multiverses where the kids actually do exist, that they're not part of her own creation, so does that mean Vision really still has to be dead for that? You know, then who, like you said, who's the father, right? You know, do they have powers? Because it looked like they had powers on the show, but here they look really weak as fuck. And they were just like normal kids watching old black and white cartoons and throwing freaking toys at Scarlet Witch as she walks in through the portal. Because like they couldn't save her mom at all, right? As she's being tossed away, into the kitchen. They were just like normal kids, right? So just interesting there. And I felt like, again, with the switch of how they were handling Strange, and being once the very calculating, strategic, I have to think of all numerous possibilities before I act, or how is this going to affect on things, to miss all those steps throughout most of the movie and just have things happen like, oops, I did it again, kind of thing like that. But then at the very end, I did like the fact that, yes, he learned from the visions in his dream and was like, well, hold on, maybe there could be something else. That's the Strange that we know. That's the Strange that's like, okay, there's always another possibility, right? There's always something, instead of just acting. Because in a way, he was kind of acting like Chris Pratt as Star-Lord, no strategy, just jump into it, gung ho, yeah. So maybe he was hanging out too much with Star-Lord. I don't know. And he kind of picked up on some bad habits.
Give me like a 2-minute. He's been so traumatized by the events of the blip. Give anything from Spider-Man, like this guy's starting to spiral. Just give me something of why he's out of control now.
Yeah.
They maybe hint that it starts with a nightmare. He's then at his one true love's wedding. There's so much opportunity between the things that we know about this character that are already showing us. Have a character go like, hey, you haven't been sleeping well. Are you okay? You need to slow down. And him go like, no, I got to keep pushing through until I solve this crisis or whatever. Just one line of dialogue or two, and it's no longer bonkers,
Yeah.
And a similar thing for WandaVision, where if you did that with both characters, but the fact that both characters are just going for it, and we're not getting we're getting other exposition throughout. Yeah. That's a missed opportunity for sure, and it doesn't take a whole new script to fix that problem. You're looking at a few lines of dialogue.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because so right before I saw the movie today, I did read a quick article where Sam Raimi said that he had to cut 35 minutes off of this movie. I wonder if we ever get treated to an uncut version, or whatever the case is, if those missing beats are somehow there. I don't know. But it is very interesting, when you hear about stuff like that, just like, well, what did they sacrifice on the cutting room floor in order just to move the story along and keep it within a respectable, runtime, right? But we'll never know. For all we know, maybe it's just never there, and maybe this is more of his Sam Raimi-isms, just he had to get rid of, But so going back to Mordor, so we are in this reality where first Mordor was a friend, then he was afraid of Strange and Chavez because of what they could do to their own reality, right? And they kind of cage him up, and then we get introduced to their version of Christine, of Miss Palmer there, and this is more of a geek moment where this reality is aware of all the multiverses, all the different possibilities and all that, to the point where they started labeling them. And they finally called the reality that we are familiar with, where Doctor Strange comes from, 616, Earth 616. Now, as a comic book fan, as a nerd, and I'm sure a lot of you out there who are fans as well, we love that moment, because that was straight out of the comic books, but also in a way it lets you, the audience, know that anything goes now, really, at this point. Because if they labeled all the multiverses, if anything this movie shows you is that anything can happen. That's why it's so interesting to really understand where they're going forward in this MCU, in this phase. I think we're in phase 4 or going to phase 5 or whatever. Do the phases even matter anymore? Because I feel like they're just going to many different things. But it's fun, but also scary, because that also gives them the opportunity to course correct a lot of stuff, bring back certain characters again, but I guess it's all about longevity, right? But that was just one moment I wanted to bring up because it was very, it was like a nerd, fandom thing. And I was just like, wow, that's pretty awesome. What's up?
No, yeah, for sure. I was gonna throw I threw a link your way, but my question is gonna be those 4 characters. I as the not comic book person have some questions about.
Oh, sure.
Who those people are?
Yeah.
What's going on? I know who John Krasinski is. Jim from The Office apparently had a really wild future after the show ended. He is playing Dr. John Reed from Fantastic Four. I'm going just
all right. We'll dive into that right now, and then I'll explain it. So, can't get enough of Doctor Strange and want to read more of his stories? There's no better place to go than Things from Another World. For over 30 years, Things from Another World has been the home for all of your comic book needs, whether it's the latest and greatest or going back in time to catch up on stories you may have missed. Comic books, graphic novels, graded comics, and exclusives. Things from Another World has it all from all the major comic book publishers from all over the world. Never want to miss a comic book issue from your favorite title? Things from Another World also offers subscriptions to ensure that you get the latest delivered once they are released. Visit tfaw.com and start reading some great stories now. In this reality, we see the Ultron bots, which is something that we saw in What If, and I guess the Ultron AI still exists in this reality. We don't know who was responsible for it if, they have their version of Tony Stark, which the rumor was originally was that they were trying to, or there was, or whatever the case was, there was speculation that Tom Cruise was going to get cast as Tony Stark for this version of this reality. Because Tom Cruise was one of the original choices to play Iron Man before they signed on Robert Downey Jr. So it would have been like a nod to the whole, hey, this could have been this way, blah, 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 whatever, right?
So a damn cameo like Tropic Thunder. That would have been really fun to see him just be silly with it. Yeah.
Yeah, so that would have been really interesting and I'm sure a lot of people would have lost their shits when that happened. But we get introduced to the first time on screen the Illuminati. So the Illuminati is an actual group that is found in the comics, and for the same exact purpose that is stated in this film. It's a society of beings from all different walks of life that are allowed to meet up and make major decisions that would affect universes, multiverses, all that stuff like that, because that's when shit gets crazy, kind of like how the Avengers were formed to fight against the alien threats like Thanos and all that stuff like that. These ultimate minds, and it's all like very smart people, all very brilliant minds that can make those hard to make decisions of what is best for their reality and for the multiverse in general, right? So Mordo is apparently a part of the council there, because he is in this reality the Sorcerer Supreme. Then we get introduced to Agent Carter, who is this reality's version of Captain America, which if you watched What If, that was the first What If episode that they ever aired, is a what if she got injected with the serum instead of Steve Rogers, and then she would have been Agent Carter, Captain Britain. That's why you look at the shield, you have like the Britain flag over it and all that. And I, for a lot of fans of that character, and there are a lot of them, and especially for that episode What If, they're gonna love this moment. They're gonna love that moment, right? Then we get introduced to Black Bolt once again. Now, Black Bolt was a character that they tried to introduce on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Then they have a spin-off show called The Inhumans, which didn't do that great. But Black Bolt is another being that has an intense superpower where his voice is like the voice of God in a way. So anything he says, whatever is in its wake, in its direction, is going to get obliterated, because that's how strong he is and all that. So you got Black of the mouth. Okay. Right. Yeah. So you got Black Bolt there. Now, their version of Captain Marvel is Maria Rambeau, who is the best friend of Carol Danvers, if you remember in the original Captain Marvel. So I guess in this reality, instead of Carol Danvers getting called off into space to get those powers, it's her that did. So she is the one that now honed in on the powers of Captain Marvel there. And this is also seen in the comic books too. So that's why when we saw Rambeau, the name Rambeau show up in the movie, we see the daughter and all that stuff like that. You know, we're like, okay, could this be a future iteration of Captain Marvel? So it's kind of a nice throwback to like, well, what if the friend got the powers instead of Carol? And then now this is the Captain Marvel here. John Krasinski, Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic of the Fantastic Four. This is the ones that the fans have been outcrying for ages now. They've been saying that if they do a live action Fantastic Four movie in the MCU, they want John Krasinski to be Reed Richards, and they want his wife, Emily Blunt, to be Invisible Woman. You know, because they see them as those characters. They think we already know they work well together, you know, and they're a family. So Fantastic Four is supposed to be a family of four who, you know, protect the universe and all that stuff like that. So there have been rumors that John has been talking to Marvel for something, and it's nice that we finally got to see that unfold in front of us. And I think for me, in the theater that I watched it in, that was the biggest pop when he showed up. It was like the biggest pop, because the last one that we get introduced to is Professor X, but that was already spoiled because of the trailer. We already heard Patrick Stewart's voice in the background and this and that. However, and I don't know if Sam Raimi had a lot to do with this, but you can have a more awesome but yet campy introduction to Professor X, because he rolls on to the screen with the original 1990s cartoon theme music of X-Men playing in the background. And I was just like, wow, they're throwing it back to that. But he has his yellow hover chair and all that stuff. And there you go. You have the Illuminati, right? Awesome moment to see them on screen. Awesome moment to have those conversations with him and with them and Doctor Strange. We find out that they were forced to kill their version of Doctor Strange because they were afraid of him. They were afraid of his capability to destroy multiverses after the events that unfolded with Thanos, right? So, and it was actually Doctor Strange that helped form this council because, you know, he too was also thinking ahead and be like, well, we need that. But they just, yeah. But I guess what he didn't calculate is that they were going to get rid of him, right? And to kind of do face to, you know, their reality, they built a monument for him. You know, called him a hero and all that, because they just don't want people to realize that they are the ones who decided to, you know, to kill him, which is very, very interesting stuff and all that. However, the best part of the whole Illuminati. Oh, wait, go ahead.
Oh, no, I have a question. So you've got these four amazing characters, kind of like, I'm imagining it almost like an Avengers type of team up of this other world, where like these super amazing characters, and maybe we can talk about it in a minute, but maybe some of them will come into our MCU at some point. But because surely they like set these characters up to have all their own spin-offs, right? Like the characters, what did they do with the characters, Rene?
So remember when I said like anything goes, you know, and I said it really doesn't matter. I felt like this was Marvel kind of telling the audience and all the fans, hey, look, this looks awesome, right? Well, you ain't gonna get it. Because literally after their introduction, 10 to 15 minutes later, each one of them gets wiped the fuck out in probably the most brutal ways possible. And I thought that was hilarious and amazing to watch in front of me.
But Charles Xavier is one of the most beloved characters.
Of course, yeah.
History. They wouldn't kill him, would they? What happened to him? Surely they would let him live.
Well, I mean, again, this is not even the main reality, right? So this is an alternate reality, so they can do whatever the fuck they want to do. You know?
Murdered, neck snapped.
Yeah.
Brutal,
so yeah, let's talk about each of those deaths, because again, Wanda takes on an avatar. Their reality's Wanda, right? And she's the one that's carrying all the crazy, doing what she's got to do to get Chavez, right? And the whole reason why she wants to get Chavez is because obviously she wants to go into a reality using her where she could be with her two powerless kids, right? So, so it becomes like this big showdown, right? It looks like it's going to be a big showdown. And all of us were like, oh, let's get ready. This is going to be the best shit ever. And you have Reed. Now, if you're not familiar with Reed Richards, he is like a huge brain. He's a brain. He knows the cosmos. He knows space. He knows multiverses. He knows alternate realities. Huge scientist, all that stuff like that. And for a lot of people, seen as like a really good leader. He takes the forefront and he's trying to communicate with Wanda. He's like, look, I know how it feels. This and that. I have kids of my own, which is true. And, you know, all this. And then she flips it on him like, okay, you have a wife? Is she still alive? And he's like, well, yeah. Whoa, yeah, that must be nice, you know. And then, well, at least the kids will have someone to take care of them when you're gone. Oh. And just like, holy shit! First,
good luck killing this super powerful guy on the super powerful council. No way, Wanda.
No way, Wanda, because we got Black Bolt, and he could just say one small word, coming out of his mouth, and he could wipe you out. And then she's like, "What mouth?" And we see that his mouth is completely covered, and he's freaking out that he actually says something to himself, and boom, we just see his internal brain bust.
That's what happened. I know. Yeah. Black Bolt, that is a much more satisfying. I just thought she exploded his head. It's actually a pretty cool way to kill Black Bolt. That's fucking She covers it, but she covers it with his own flesh, Matrix style. Mm-hmm. And then because he says, "Oh, that's." Because I guess you got to try to break through, and that's his only thing he has.
Right. Because he's like freaking out, and then he's like, boom, and he just
for this movie. It's like that is horrific. That is nightmarish. Yeah. And then there's some things we see in this movie that a lot of other movies in Marvel would have glossed over, and they're showing nightmare stuff for real nightmares, and also like, okay, this real thing happening is a nightmare. Oh,
yeah, that was cool. Yeah. They really pushed the boundaries during, especially this part, because like I said, every death is so brutal, and this I will give credit to Sam Raimi for this, because only his mind would think of something like either him or James Gunn. If you watch Peacemaker, like James Gunn, this is something he would have thought of as well, but Raimi did a really good job with that. So you have Black Bolt, who just got his brain blown up inside of his head because of his own words. Then you have Reed, who's trying his best as Mr. Stretchy Pants there. And what does she do? Essentially makes him into like silly string, ripping his skin into like all his into like confetti until she gets to the brain and just smashes the brain. So you got Reed, who's now assed out.
Light work of him.
Yeah.
I was going like, okay, well, he's going to have to fight. Nope. Before I could even have the thought, oh, what's he going to do in response? He was, boom, kaput.
Just,
wild.
Like, just so nuts, And then you have a showdown between their Captain Marvel and Peggy Carter, right? And then, you have Agent Carter, who is your Captain America. So she's like, even she's picking herself up, and she's like, I could do this all day. She has the same lines and everything like that. Throwing the shields, and really great stuff on screen. But then again, one of those who gets asked out so quick. How? Wanda just takes his shield and throws it right back at her, super speed, and basically splits her in half.
One move. Yeah.
Yeah.
Done.
Just like, foink, that's it. And then you have poor Captain Marvel, who did her best, right? But, Wanda, again, being so strong of a person that she is, basically strips her down from her power, and she's left alone on the floor, powerless, and she just has a statue fall on top of her and crushes her. And then there's your Illuminati, fellas. That's it. Guys and girls, your Illuminati is there, dead and gone. But then, because, what about Professor X, right? and you already alluded to this before. He's in his wheelchair, so he can't zoom that fast over. So he waits for this opportune moment, just about the time when he's about to confront Chavez and Palmer, and he shows up behind. He's like, "Surprise! I'm gonna go in your head," right? Which was something Xavier would do. And you get this really cool moment where he's walking around in her brain, and he sees the essence of the original Wanda, their Wanda, trapped under rubble, right? But like you said, in a very horror element way, you get this red mist that's like sneaking up behind him, and basically saying, "Sorry, Professor, you ain't gonna be able to save this person." And just
theory, yeah, sorry.
No. Just, and to cap it out, the mist surrounds him, and you just see Wanda sneak in, snapping his neck in her head and in reality, and now he's dead. And there really goes your Illuminati. All in a matter of 10, 15 minutes?
Each death was about 7 seconds or so, like the fight scene, it felt like. So you're cutting back and forth between different moments at points in the movie, but you put all those deaths together. I guess Xavier had the longest one. His strategy was go into her mind where she is the woman who's to find the actual woman of the body who's taken over.
Right.
And then it's a metaphor because she's under rubble or like in a prison cave, and he's gonna pull her out. We're seeing like the rocks kind of tremble, and like, okay, maybe she'll get crushed now. And how would that? What if she does die? What does that mean for the body of like? Are we in an Inception problem where if you die in your Xavier brain world, then the person who's avataring you from the actual Earth 616, whatever, like, how do you? Nope, she just red smokes the shit out of Xavier and then snaps his neck.
Yep.
That was wild. I think those 90s Marvel movies are going to be those 90s X-Men movies are going to be my first foray into superhero movies, just with my age group. Those are, and actually you might remember better because I'm young at this point, but like X-Men movies come out a little before Spider-Man movies, the Hugh Jackman, Halle Berry of it all.
So, yeah.
And then that to me was like, he is as Mount Rushmore sacred superhero character as it gets. And he's that anyway, of course, but for folks like me who were early adults at the early onset of the MCU, we've been here kind of like the whole time aware of it. I was like, when you're an 11-year-old hero of mine was Charles Xavier, right?
Yeah.
He's been in this thing since the beginning. Is he? That's another question, is like, I know we got Blade stuff happening in the future. Is he the first character to show up in the MCU who is now currently a person in the MCU? Or, you know what I'm saying? I know it gets a little complicated between X-Men and this,
right?
And who owns what when, but I can't think of anyone else who was in an earlier with the same actor. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, this was when the first X-Men movie came out, that was like 2000, I think. And yeah, we had our Blades come out and all that, but not a lot of people really associated that with comic book movies. Wesley Snipes was at his prime, and people just saw that as a very cool action vampire movie. X-Men was really the first accepted comic book movie to come out on the big screen that reinvigorated the whole comic book genre because of how well that movie did. And then eventually it led to the ability for them to make a Spider-Man, the Sam Raimi Spider-Mans and all that stuff like that. So the fact that, Professor X, portrayed by, good old Patrick Stewart there, he's been with this tied to that character for a very, very long time. 22 years now? Yeah. And I think moving forward, Marvel has their own idea of what they're going to do with X-Men once they finally introduce them into the current MCU. And from what I've heard was that Patrick Stewart agreed to do this as a one-off because I don't think he wants to come back as Professor X anymore. He is definitely getting much older, so it's going to be harder and harder for him and all that. But I love the fact that he agreed to do that, you know, and I think this was also Marvel's way of just saying, we know you love these characters. We know you love your Professor X's. We know you love your Fantastic Four. Yes, John is a great dude. You know, this is a preview. Trust us, we're going to do something similar, but it's not going to be what you guys think it's going to be. You know, and that's why I felt like, not in a way, it's kind of big, like a big FU to like fan casting and expectations and all that stuff like that. But I did like that they played with that and kind of gave little nods to, you know, what the fans love, what the fans have been talking about and all that. You know, because even though the Inhumans didn't do that great, I think a lot of people were really excited for them to come out. So the fact that they got Black Bolt back, you know, for his quick, you know, 2 minutes of screen fame, I thought, you know, was like, again, a nice little nod from them saying that we know you love this character. Don't worry. You know, in this reality, he did. But, you know, in the 616 world, he's definitely going to come back. Just let us, you know, introduce them when it's time to introduce them and all that. So, yeah. So, did you have anything else? Any other questions about all that?
I feel like there's a lot. There's a couple other possible tie-ins. I know the link I sent over to you was the Michael Stuhlbarg's character, a surgeon from the last Doctor Strange movie. I'm curious, the way they set that up makes me think that he might become a bad guy in a future Doctor Strange something. And then also, something that blew my mind on a missed opportunity for this movie was Shang-Chi, that they could have had a tie-in when they're at any point when they're defending Armitage or somewhere, between Benedict Wong's character being important in Spider-Man, the latest Spider-Man, Shang-Chi being one of the recent highly successful Marvel movies, and even though it was kind of it wasn't fully tied into all the stuff before, it was kind of like one of those one-offs that we talked about they've been doing more lately. It's in the same world, and I feel like there's a missed opportunity there. I don't know if you want to keep talking about the Charles Xavier. It's a little depressing. As someone who's casually into this stuff, the 616 of it all, it's hard for me to follow that. Yeah. So even then, it felt like Charles Xavier was dying before my very eyes. And I guess, right, it's where we're at in the MCU right now with them, the ability to tie in so many different things. And then after Endgame, they have kind of you clear the plate off and you get to figure out where you want to go next. Something we've already talked about for this movie is that this one felt like a wrong foot. It didn't feel sure-footed. There's movies from the first few phases that felt that way at the time, where you're like, oh, this was a flop, or what are they going to do with Ant-Man? He's silly. But then you kind of realize over time, like, oh, he's going to be actually very important, and he's there for Endgame. Yeah. So maybe they're doing that. But I think there's that Illuminati thing just being its own little blip from that universe that they happen to be in at that time. I don't know if there's a lot of takeaways from that, except they're willing to fuck with the fan service concept.
Yeah.
There's another version of this where John Krasinski goes off on an escape pod and they go, guess what? You're going to have a John Krasinski movie for sure whenever you want it. And the dude ends up in 616. I don't know the logistics of all that. But there are other, like the Shang-Chi missed opportunity where they could have done some tie in there. And if they had done Spider-Man, one of the things that made it so successful was tying in the old Spider-Mans and wrapping up some bows. I think fans right now, and myself included, are craving, tie up that bow a little more tightly. Let me know where I'm at. Back in the day, Ant-Man could be a one-off, and maybe it would have some small contribution to the big MCU overall. Right now, I'm spoiled because Endgame brought everything together, and then I go Black Widows, Eternals, Shang-Chi, this movie, like they didn't hold hands saying like early on saying we promise all this will matter someday. Right now, between that and the TV shows, I'm not sure what I'm investing in right now and spending
Yeah.
this time on. I don't know. That's kind of my thought, and it's almost like that moment of killing the Illuminati was like a, even if you for a moment I go, oh, this could be very important. It's not. Like
Right.
I feel a little aimless in where the MCU is at right now and who's important and who's not. You know.
Yeah. No, and I don't blame you at all because it's a blessing and a curse. Like it's one of those cool things where I liked the fact that we don't know where they're going here because and basically anything is possible, right? Or are they setting up so many different storylines based off of what you want to follow, right? So are you, if you're interested in the Disney Plus shows, okay, are they setting something up for some of the characters there that you will only find out through those type of shows? You know, are you invested in, you know, whatever's happening with Eternals or whatever the case is? Because that looks like that's going to be something that's going to be in the movies only. And let's see what happens there, right? It's not, I don't want to say it's all over the place because I know they do have a roadmap and they do have a plan. It's just hard to really understand what that is right now, you know? And I think by doing what they did in this movie, it's again reinforcing the fact that anything can happen, right? And they have the ability to change things on the fly if need be, because it could be an easy thing like, well, it's a multiverse thing, right? So we need to switch things up a little bit and we'll just blame it on the multiverse, right? Oh, you multiverse, we're blaming it on you again. So it's
check whatever you
right.
need to do, bring somebody in, kill somebody, whatever you want to have on a screen, you can now have.
Yeah. And
Like,
that could be a curse.
Yeah.
You know?
That's a good that point of, we see it right now with, like, I don't know if Ben Affleck, I thought he was going to be in another Batman movie. Now I'm not sure. And this feels like a DC situation where anything could happen and you don't know if you're going to get that. Like, here's what's happening with the Flash movie. Is Ezra Miller okay? I don't know.
Yeah.
And that's so chaotic. But the multiverse does is it kind of allows them as much carte blanche retconning for that chaos. That makes it even harder to follow. If at the end of whatever phase 8 is, guess what, the multiverse all makes sense now, that's awesome. And it eventually you have to have a cheat code because eventually actors are going to die. Someone will try to renegotiate a contract in a weird way. Like, they were so precise with those first few. They got lucky in some ways to have things tie up as nicely as it did. They had to do a few, like, is Edward Norton okay? Has anyone checked on him lately? The last movie I saw him in, I wish I hadn't. And then Mark, what do you know? It's Mark Ruffalo. Like, there was a few things, and it's almost like early on, they're like, hey, if they had that 15-year meeting 15 years ago, they're like, hey, we got to make sure that we have a multiverse ASAP. As soon as we're done with this thing we're working on, let's build that in. So that way, we, you know, hope Edward Norton comes back for sometime the year 2030 when there's 3 Hulks in the same room like they Spider-Man. That would be great. That's obviously bonkers. Yeah, I know that's a bit of a tangent, but that's part of me feeling lost in all of this.
Sure, yeah.
Maybe they tie it in the way they did before when I wasn't sure if they would, you know? I don't know.
It could be. Like, again, we don't know what Kevin Feige is planning. You know, I don't remember if it was this episode or the previous one where I talked about they just recently had an offsite where they're planning pretty much the next 10 plus years of MCU. So they must have this like ultimate roadmap kind of homeland Claire Danes style where they have like this rope tying to this and this rope tying to that, and you know, all of a sudden the giant conference room looks like a freaking string puzzle or what have you. But you know, so far they haven't really led us in of any bad road. You know, I mean, I think if anything, some fans may consider this to be one of those questionable decisions. You know, like, you know, we said it before, this may be a decisive Marvel movie for the Marvel fans because the handling of Wanda's character, the handling of Doctor Strange's character, you know, what's going to happen now with the multiverse, because even the multiverse was treated a little differently in this one, you know, where they kind of said like, if you have certain dreams, that means you are in essence living through that alternate version of yourself experiencing that moment, which was not something they ever explained before. It wasn't anything like that didn't exist like that before. But now there's a reasonable explanation as to a multiverse version of yourself existing because you have a dream about it. It just seems kind of weird that they would do it that way. But who knows? I mean, we'll see what happens. In I've always said in Feige I trust, but let's see for how long. If it, if it gets more convoluted, as time goes on, right? So,
Yeah. So, I was thinking about Chiwetel Ejiofor and Benedict Cumberbatch's careers. They're in Doctor Strange together, and they have their buddy moment here.
Yeah.
I was also going through Chiwetel Ejiofor's IMDb, and he was in a movie called Sherlock Gnomes, where it was gnomes, but it was a Sherlock Holmes thing, and it was an animated thing where he lent his voice. Also, the most serious movie either of them have been in, where I remember Chiwetel Ejiofor coming onto the scene, is 12 Years a Slave, where Benedict Cumberbatch's character is the owner, slaver, and then ends up like taking a liking to and then selling Chiwetel Ejiofor's character, Solomon Northup, just to save his life because someone's going to kill him there. I don't know if this is part of the MCU's whole strategy with the multiverse and like Sherlock Gnomes, and then we have Sherlock Holmes on the BBC. I know Disney's been acquiring a lot of properties left and right. I don't know how far this thing goes. That's how misguided I am right now, how aimless it feels. That's obviously absurd, right? But maybe. It's probably absurd, right? But what you're talking about as far as this being maybe a misstep and polarizing, and some people who were all the way in, and in-game box office numbers are so wild. You have the ones we talked about that feel like one-offs, and then the TV shows. And I think right now their batting average, last 5 movies, I'm going to say 2 hits. Of the TV shows, I think it's maybe a 50% hit rate. But as far as not MCU fans and comic book fans and people who are just in it, I just want to know how they handle this. I'm curious, and it sparks that comic book fan brain. More casual person like me who enjoys TV shows and I enjoy movies, and I got into MCU and I was obsessed with Endgame and watched all of them, did a whole marathon before. The casual fans who've been giving them so much money, where it goes from a niche comic book thing to the story of cinema of the last 15 years. You don't get to have this many missteps and not tell us that it's going to pay off. I'm hearing more from folks who, I didn't watch that Marvel show. I heard I don't need to see that movie. That feels like once that becomes the norm, there could be a world where all of this pays off 10 years from now, and it's the greatest box. It beats Endgame at the box office. My gut right now is that we're between COVID box office issues and this disservice that they're doing to themselves through some of these decisions. Maybe there's not a good way to do it. Maybe after Endgame, you couldn't. This is the one. Doctor Strange, the one way that forward for them. I don't know, but I'm concerned that they don't make it to that place to where Endgame even gets to happen of this new version of things, or if it does, it's more of a whimper than the Big Bang it was last time.
Right. Yeah, and I think because of the events of the world, the things that we've all been going through for the last couple of years. I think because of that, it forced them to switch things up a little bit. We had movies that came out not at the proper time it was supposed to come out, but because of scheduling, because of lack of finishing and completion, just like on the TV front, WandaVision was not supposed to be the first series to come out. It was really actually supposed to be Captain America and the Winter Soldier. That was supposed to be the first one to come out. I think WandaVision was supposed to be the second or third in their overarching plan. But they've had to make adjustments and all that, and I think they themselves are dealing with that right now. and that's why maybe it feels very all over the place, because maybe it wasn't their original vision of the roadmap, right? But I think as things get better and they're catching up and everything, I think that's when we're gonna see it hopefully making more and more sense. I do feel like the Disney Plus shows are making more sense than the movies right now, but the movies themselves do feel like a lot of standalone stuff. So at the end of the day, it doesn't really hurt, right? It'll be interesting to see what happens with Thor: Love and Thunder when that comes out, and how that's really gonna play out. Because if that feels off too, or that feels out of place, then could we put right? Could that no? Does that just basically mean now we are maybe oversaturated? And, maybe it's time to cut back, or I mean, I don't think they're ever going to cut back, but as a fan and as a casual fan, is it time for you to be like, you know what, maybe I'll just catch certain things that catch my eye. I may not have to go out and watch every single thing that comes out, because it's just a bit much, and for the most part, it's I'm not getting the same thing out of it like I did when I originally invested, like over 10 years ago or what have you, right? So I mean, time will tell, but I'm it actually brings up a very good point. I'm curious about what all of you guys and girls out there think. I've heard people say like the comic book fatigue, the superhero movie fatigue, like, are we getting to that point where it's just too much now, where we have all this content and we don't know where they're going, and is it time to kind of just pinpoint, all right, if it's these characters, I'm only going to follow these characters. If it's this story, I'm only going to follow this story. Or just take a break in general and just wait to see if it makes more sense a year or two from now, when we start seeing the fruits of whatever they're building actually coming back. And then is it going to be one of those situations where, like, I guess now I have to go back and watch this and that to catch up and da-da-da-da-da, right? So I am curious, like, what all of you think, because I ran a poll once on the channel when Moon Knight was coming out, and I asked basically the audience, how, are you looking forward to Moon Knight and watching Moon Knight and all that? And a good amount of people voted saying that I don't need to watch another Marvel show. So I have a feeling that there are already people out there feeling that, they're getting that. And I think it's because of the abundance of content that we're getting. But it is very interesting to see, and again, love to hear what all of you guys and girls think. Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying this episode so far, but before we continue, I wanted to quickly talk about Bulletproof Coffee. Bulletproof Coffee is my favorite coffee of choice to start off my mornings with. Why? Because it's clean coffee. What does that mean? Well, one, there are no chemicals in it. Why? Because they go through this multi-step process of making sure that all of their beans are fully clean and free of any chemicals, so that when you get the beans delivered to you, it is the pure beans, the pure coffee, the goodness that you've been wanting, the taste, the flavor, and the nutritional value as well, without worrying about any added chemicals or anything else put into the mix there. It also doesn't have that weird acidic taste that some coffees give you. I don't know how about you, but for me, some coffees kind of give me that weird sensation in my stomach, makes me a little burpy, and it kind of drags me down a little bit instead of really waking me up, which is something that I need from my coffee every day. Bulletproof also offers a lot of keto-friendly snacks and supplements, anything that you need to kind of add to your everyday nutritional needs, add to your diet, and pretty much transforms the way you feel every day. So for a limited time, if you use this code that you see on the screen right now, LOWKEY GEEK, all caps, one word, you can get 15% off your order. So what is it better than that, right? Check out the link in the description of this episode. Use this code, get yourself your discount, and make your mornings a little bit more bulletproof with Bulletproof Coffee. Now, back to the episode. So just to close things out here about Doctor Strange. So a lot of speculation coming into this movie too was that a lot of things that was revealed in What If was going to be revealed here in this movie as well. And I feel like it was one of those give and takes where some things were, but other things were not specifically, right? Like you've mentioned the zombie Doctor Strange, which was something that was hinted on What If, and then we got to see that actually come into life, not in the same story elements as it it happened on What If, but we got to see it, right? But I think one of the biggest ones that were kind of not misleading, but I think it was just based off of people's speculations, was that the quote unquote final showdown between the two Stranges, our Doctor Strange and the evil Doctor Strange, that we were going to get the same evil Doctor Strange, or Doctor Strange Prime as they refer him to as, from the What If show. And that was the one that in his reality, he tried to change time so many times to try to save Christine that he pretty much obliterated his entire universe, right? And he was left all alone and all that. We did not get that Doctor Strange in this movie. We got a version of it that was somewhat close, where yes, this Strange did try to save Christine after a while, but then he gave up. And then he learned the Darkhold magic, and then he kind of flipped it, where he's just like, now he's more curious about going to other universes and killing off their Doctor Strange, because he wants to be the ultimate Doctor Strange left in the all of the multiverse, right? So nice little flip there, right? And very interesting. And there was that back and forth between our Strange and that Strange, because our Strange needs to get a hold of the Darkhold magic in order to finally fight off Wanda and stop whatever she's trying to do, or at least get her to the point where we have more control of the situation, and America Chavez, whether you liked her or not, had one of those typical moments of a young budding hero where she finally realized how to hone in on her own powers, and it doesn't have to revolve around, it only happens when I get scared. So she had her Spider-Man moment where she realized, like, I can actually control it, and I have it all in me. So, what did you think about all that?
So another big missed opportunity, which I didn't realize it necessarily at the time, was in MCU history, some of the coolest fight scenes are someone against an alternate version of themselves. I'm thinking of Vision at the end of WandaVision. Sure. I'm thinking of Captain America versus Captain America when we're doing time travel, and it's not multiverse stuff. Or the Doctor Strange on Doctor Strange fight wasn't that great, and it ended pretty weak with him jumping down and falling on a spike. When I'm thinking about the way they handled action in this movie, because there was also, when we're talking about the Illuminati and how quick those deaths were, this was not an action movie, and it's almost like Sam Raimi said, I don't know, but if he said, I like doing horror movies, those Spider-Man movies, all the choreography and the punching and kicking, that's not what I'm a fan of. I'm going to shortchange every single one of those fight scenes. I'm trying to think even through what the good fight scenes were, which is something where in any given Marvel movie, even if it's one of those weird genre ones where it's more of a one-off, there's usually some good fighting no matter what. And here it's more of the Doctor Strange. He'll make a bus, cut it in half with a light beam, or it's when he stabs the octopus eyeball guy, which we'll have to talk about eyeballs in a second, what that was at the end. But with a giant like lamppost something. Yeah. This was bad action. We're talking about Wanda trying to break through the walls and then just pops up. In that way, this was a horror movie, because that happens a lot in a horror movie. Someone chased and they're on a mission. They're trying to get through to the thing. And then they see the big bat, and then somebody's head gets chopped off pretty quickly. Yeah. That's interesting. I hadn't thought about that. Because we got to see someone fighting themselves multiple times in the MCU. We haven't seen that with Doctor Strange. That would have been pretty interesting, where he's just like putting himself through portals and like, I don't know.
Yeah, it would have been like great to, like, he didn't even utilize the mirrorverse, right? Just like when he had his fight with Spider-Man, he did the mirror dimension and they were fighting through there. He didn't even attempt to do any of that stuff, like he did briefly with Wanda as Scarlet Witch, but she found her way to break out of that real quick, and I thought that was pretty cool. I felt like the majority of the fights in this movie all culminated in the beginning, where we were thrown into this fight with Suave Strange. I call him Suave because he has a ponytail. Suave Strange and Chavez fighting a big monster, right? And that was like a big battle. And then shortly after that, in the streets of New York City, it's again Strange, Chavez, and eventually Wong fighting yet another big monster. And you could tell, like, Sam Raimi, he just loves monsters. He loves horror and all that, and that was really what he was focusing on throughout this whole movie. This is not your Captain America or Winter Soldier fight scenes. This is not your Avengers fight scenes. This is not like that. It was a lot of this and that, and look over there and I'm over here, and all that kind of stuff, right? It was a lot of that. And yes, some of it was weak. Totally, the fight with his evil version was really, really, I thought, weak, and I guess I was hoping for more from that in total. But yeah, you're not wrong for feeling that way. But regardless, let's just dive into the ending and how the movie pretty much ended up. So, obviously they did what they had to do. Chavez is now training on Comitage with Wong. Doctor Strange goes off into his own. He's still protecting the Sanctum in New York City. Wong seems to be like that really connecting factor with a lot of these movies. Like you mentioned before, he was at the end of Shang-Chi in the post-credit scenes. He pulls Shang-Chi and Awkwafina into the portal and starts like explaining stuff to them and everything. So you're right. Where were they during this whole time if the last we saw of them was them hanging out with Wong, right? So Wong has been around almost as much as Strange has. It makes sense since he is the Sorcerer Supreme now in our 616. And he's kind of like the protector of this realm and all that. But it looks like Chavez may potentially be, I don't know, a sorcerer too, because we see her training and trying to do all that stuff. Wanda looks to be dead, but I don't think she is. I think she's definitely going to come back eventually, but she had to pretty much take herself out as she's getting rid of that temple that holds the Darkhold magic, the originating area of the Darkhold magic and all that stuff like that. But as we're going through the mid-credits scene at the end of the movie, hey, it's Charlize Theron. What's up? She just pops up in her cute little purple outfit there, and she's like, hey, you messed up, and now we have to correct your mess up again, and she opens up the dark dimension, which we haven't seen since Doctor Strange 1, but I'm pretty sure you're probably wondering, well, who the fuck is she, right? And why is she popping up?
Yeah.
So
sure.
in the comic books, that character's name is Clea. Clea, just think of Doctor Strange, but a dark dimension version of Doctor Strange. So if you remember the first Doctor Strange movie, his ultimate one-on-one was with him and Dormammu. Dormammu is the crazy dark dimension guy that he kept like reversing time and asking him the same question over and over again, driving him nuts and all that. Dormammu's thing is like Dormammu always wants to take over all the universes, right? So Clea is that dimension's Doctor Strange. She is like the Sorcerer Supreme there. But because of what happened with the multiverse now and all that, I guess some things got messed up in the dark dimension, that now she comes to seek his help to try to fix or correct or to answer to all the problems that have happened because of it. And because now Doctor Strange has that crazy third eye, which is part of the Darkhold magic, which we saw the evil Doctor Strange have. And since our Doctor Strange had to ingest some of the Darkhold magic to fight Wanda.
Okay.
And if you remember, Wong kept asking him, like, "Are you okay?" Because you had to ingest some of that Darkhold magic, and that's not something to take lightly. And Strange's like, "I'm perfectly fine." Well, apparently he's not, and apparently there is some remnants of that Darkhold magic within him. What does that mean moving forward for Strange? I don't know. But I guess we'll find out. But now he has that, he could summon the darker powers along with his usual power set there. So
I didn't realize that was a dark powers thing. That makes more sense because I just thought that was the other character had developed that with some. There's a moment I know that I'm obtuse when it comes to this comic book stuff. I go, wait, did the other Doctor Strange just pop in? Was there some weird misdirection? What you're saying makes so much more sense. Thank you for explaining that.
Yeah.
It's when you use dark magic, then you can get a third eye. And now Benedict Cumberbatch character is going to might have a third eye for the rest of the time.
Well, I don't think it's
immediately because that's hard to fucking look at.
Yeah, I don't think it's a permanent thing. I think it's when you hone in on that side of the magic, that's something that forms on you, whatever. And again, I don't know for a fact that that's how it works. There's a limit to my comic book knowledge, but it just looks like it's one of those things that when you conjure up that side of the magic, then that's like the calling card, right? That's like, oh, I'm in dark magic mode. Here's my third eye. Yeah, so
not only are because maybe someone out there, if you have the answer, throw it in the comments. I beg,
please.
But I'm pretty sure we're also just kind of making shit up at some point. These two post-credit scenes have to be the two most disappointing post-credit scenes of all time. And if Sam Raimi was like right in the editing process, was like, I'm gonna fuck with these guys a little bit. They said I get to choose whatever. He kills off some like the John Krasinski, which you're talking about, was like a big rumor. Like, what will that be? Maybe it'll still happen, whatever. But he does that. He kills Charles Xavier, longest running beloved character in this universe. He then has a post-credit scene that when I'm thinking about it that way, that could have been just a little blip with Third Eye of Doctor Strange being like, hey, no, I'm fine. Whoa, I'm not okay. Okay, that was weird. I'm going to go take some Advil and it's gone. That might be insignificant. Last one, which I'm going to let you explain or tell what happens in it. It's the most meaningless one I can ever fathom. I kept looking for things in the background of like, where's the significance here? Even the ones that are silly and dumb before, there was some character. Oh, this person's now in this universe. Oh, I've never seen that guy before. What does that mean? Even the one where it was just the sound of we didn't know if it was like Thor's hammer or Iron Man.
Right.
Like, that's the most meaningless one that had so much, or like the most random one that had so much meaning. It was just a joke, right? Of a buddy of Sam Raimi's. Am I missing something?
No, you're not missing anything at all. Again, so the ending of the movie, we see Doctor Strange with the third eye, right? So he's walking out of the sanctum, and then all of a sudden he has a headache. Third eye! And that's how the movie ends, right? So that kind of tells the audience, he's not that great, right? And then mid-credit scene, again, walking down the street. So I guess he's fine now. And then, Charlize Theron pops up as Clea, said, hey, I need you to come with me back to the dark dimension. Let me cut through, time and space, and let's go. And like, you're not afraid, right? And then it's like, third eye, no, I'm never afraid, because I guess now he has dark magic, right? The last post-credit scenes, after all the credits run, I consider this Sam Raimi shawarma moment. Now, if you remember the original Avengers, the running joke that Tony Stark always said is like, hey, I know this great shawarma place, on something street and all that. When they finally defeat all the aliens in New York, one of the last things he says, like, all right, who's down for shawarma, right? So I felt like it was one of those things where, Sam Raimi is huge friends with Bruce Campbell. He knows people are going to sit through all the credits just to wait for that last scene. And the last we left of Bruce, he was still punching himself in the face because that's what Doctor Strange made him do. And he even made a joke. It's like, it's going to last like 3 weeks or whatever. So I guess we're finally at the end of 3 weeks. And Bruce stops punching himself and literally looks into the camera, looks at us, the audience, and says, it's over. And that was just a big like, ha-ha, and that was it. And I think that was just Sam Raimi's way of just having fun, really.
If somebody loved the movie, that probably would be like a little, oh, gotcha, that was fun. As someone who didn't enjoy the movie, that was left it in even a worse taste in my mouth of like, this is just a big troll. Like, if there's the version where it's just all the things that I would least like between fantasy, the campiness, whatever Sam Raimi's doing in those regards, and he's short, and they're trying to open up for the next phases and saying this is the multiverse, so different things can happen and we might fuck with your expectations. And then he has two post-credit scenes that are sorry, you're right. The first one was actually meaningful. The last one was felt like a fuck you. There's too many times where it felt like a fuck you for this moment in Marvel, where like if you told me Sam Raimi's check from an old Spider-Man took too long to clear, and he's just like dicking with someone who, oh yeah, they still have that same person in accounting who got hired over when whatever acquisition. Like I'm bothered that to me one of the most likely explanations for why I didn't like this movie was like Sam Raimi's like somebody, you know, pissed off Sam Raimi at the urinal one time, or like said something about his whoever he's dating. Like there's too many go fuck yourself moments for it. And if that's, maybe you would know, is that just Sam Raimi is always doing that? I don't know, but that's a lot of that for Marvel, you know?
Yeah, no, I don't entirely disagree with you. But Sam Raimi is that very quirky type of. He has that quirky sense of humor. Again, if you go back to his library of stuff that he's done, like you'll see a lot of it. You definitely do see a lot of it, and he loves to have fun with the audience, and that's kind of his way of having fun with the audience, especially knowing that the audience is still going to be there once the last bit of credits rolls, and he's having fun. Because right now, that's always the expectation, right? It's like, as a moviegoer, Marvel has now forced the audience to, even if it's not a Marvel movie, to expect that there's going to be something at the end of the credits, and even when there's not, right? So Sam Raimi is just having fun with that whole thing. Plus, people, you're right. Those who love Sam Raimi, those who love Bruce Campbell, they're going to enjoy that moment because they're going to be like, aha, that was pretty funny. Like when I saw it, I laughed. I thought it was like, oh, that's pretty funny, but at the same time, I knew how it would affect others, which made me laugh even more because it was a troll moment. And even in the audience, you would hear people moan and groan and all that stuff, and you're like, that's it, and well, they didn't ask you to wait. It's like, this is kind of your own doing, right? So but yeah, it is what it is. Like I said in the other video, it's definitely not one of my most favorite Marvel films as of recent. It definitely is kind of mid-tier for me. I gave it a rating of a 3, maybe 3.5, depending on the week and all that. And I know for you, Blake, this was definitely on the low end for you as well, right?
Yeah, no, for sure. I think my last thoughts, like in summary,
yeah,
another missed opportunity. America Chavez's character, her arc starts early on. We're realizing that she lost her parents, because of this power that she couldn't control. And then the moral of the story at the very end is face your fears. That's the advice that she receives, and that's when she's finding her powers. That's essentially the moral of the story overall, where Doctor Strange is allowing dark magic and trusting himself more and facing those fears. And then Wanda, more than anybody, at some point, I think it was Benedict Wong's character is saying, you be okay knowing that your boys are happy in another universe and that someone else is taking care of them, or do you have to control everything? Instead, Wanda's lesson kind of by the end, when she starts to like give up on her mission, the sad lesson that we watch her learn was that is, she messed it up and she shouldn't have been trying to control everything. Instead, process everything that happened before. Again, I'm going to tie it back into my criticism of the film overall, is like, the idea of like, face your fears, be accepting of where we're at in the Marvel universe. You're not in control of everything. We're no longer in MCU. We're in like MCMU, or MCM, whatever, the multiverse. I feel directionless right now. I don't have that confidence that they imparted to America Chavez at the end of that movie. That was a nice moral to that story. I I'm certain I will keep watching Marvel stuff. I still haven't seen Moon Knight, and this might be the first one where I fall off. We've seen it happen with franchises before, where like I know that you talked about Moon Knight and Star Wars stuff a lot, but like there was a minute where we thought, oh, they're gonna have a new Star Wars movie every 2 years, and they're already planning the next trilogy, and then nope, couple wrong plays early on there, and now they are in TV show mode. Mandalorian was a hit, and then Boba Fett, to my mind, was not. We're in a multiverse outside of the MCU where there's so many options for how people can spend their time. People got so comfortable with streaming in the age of COVID, and box office numbers are so down. What used to be successful, I was looking at it earlier when we were talking about X-Men, like at the time they had the third highest opening day in movie history, and it was something like 21 million. I don't know what this movie ends up with. I know it's not going to be a Spider-Man number. I'm confident saying that. We're now in an era where what might be like the next version of Marvel is like, okay, we're going to get people talking about our show or our movie for a few days. If they talk about it, if they watch the whole thing and tell someone else to watch it, that's great. And then it'll pass really quickly. People are so distracted in like our modern media multiverse of like you be doing anything like the Super Bowl is the only consistent thing anymore. Or sorry, the big game, if you need to cut that. Not even the Oscars. Yeah, can have reliable viewers.
Right.
I hope that Marvel makes more precise decisions moving forward. I'm sure I'll keep watching it. But I know that eventually you lose enough fans, and now in-game isn't going to be what it was last time. That was everyone at the water cooler. That was one of the few modern day water cooler moments we have. So many times you go, oh, have you seen this new show? Someone goes, no, I'm going to binge it in a month, or no, I'm waiting on my buddy to watch it. And there used to be like, this feels like a lost opportunity right here, and I hope they regain their footing. I really do, because I love this franchise, this IP.
Blake, all I have to tell you is face your fears. Marvel will always have your back, and they will always be able to fulfill your need for good old comic book superhero fun times on screen, whether it's in the theater or at home on Disney Plus or not. And they could just be like, fuck off, you're just one dude, we don't give a shit, you know. Say what you want.
If that worked and I got the powers, I would immediately first I would open up a multiverse portal and figure out what happened to her moms. That's the easiest way to wrap up this movie in a feel-good type of way. Is she faces her fears? And where are the moms? Are they okay? Maybe in her spinoff movie that's a huge thing. Every time in a movie you go, oh, here's the biggest part of your crisis, what's eating away at you. Don't worry, we'll wrap it up and you'll get to hug your mom with you. That would have been so beautiful. The second thing I would do after I find America Chavez's moms and like try to connect them would be to go to a universe where this movie didn't suck.
Oh, terrible. I think they did leave that open on purpose to explore whether or not they decide to do an America Chavez show or whatever the case have you, or whatever. Also, I love the whole face your fear aspect, because even Christine Palmer says that to Strange when Strange confesses in the alternate version of her, saying like, I love you. I've always wanted to be with you. It's just, I had to do this and do that, blah, 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 and that. And she basically tells him, face your fears also. And, or else it would have all worked out. I hope all of you watching and listening face your own fear, and let us know in the comments. Don't be afraid. Tell us what you think about the movie. Tell us what you think about our takes, whether it's you agree or you disagree. We want to hear from all of you, no matter what the comments are. Let us know. Hope you enjoyed watching this episode of Movie Time, talking about Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. And before we sign off for the day, Blake, where can people find you online?
Go to letterboxd.com. Blake Wolf SSN is my screen name. BLAKEWOLF SSN, like Blake Wolf's screen name. Follow me there. I love that place, and you'll see me. Currently, after our conversation, Doctor Strange had a generous 3.5. I'm about to drop that right now.
Boom. Which is funny because normally when we have conversations about movies, it actually changes your mind positively. So it sounds like this is the opposite of
that. You would convince me that this was actually good. Instead, you're like, no, it's just Sam Raimi doing his thing. I was like, okay, well, that's not good enough. I'm not feeling forgiving right now.
Hey,
but
I'm just being
fun with you. Thank you. And
always.
I love doing this with you.
No, same here. I mean, this is the reason why I look forward to this every week. So, yes, don't forget, follow Blake on Letterboxd. Great app and platform there. As for myself and LOWKEY GEEK, you can see all the tags on screen. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, what have you. Don't forget, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. If you've already done all that now and in the past, thank you so much. We appreciate all the support. For you audio listeners, thank you for listening every week. If you want an audio version of this, don't forget, you could just go to your podcast platform of choice and find this episode and others under the LOWKEY GEEK channel there. And I guess the next movie, or at least the next big movie that we're planning to hopefully talk about, is Top Gun. So we'll see how that pans out. But stay tuned to the channel. If you hit that notification bell, you will get notified every time a new episode of ours is uploaded. So with all that being said, I'm Rene. This is Blake. This has been Movie Time, and we'll catch all y'all next time. Bye, everyone.